Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see so many people in the same room. So thank you for coming along to listen to my talk. I'm Anna McMillan. I'm the head of QAT at 2i Testing. So I'm going to talk to you about mastering high stakes on the crest of the advancing technology wave. It's a very grand title. So a little bit about me. I have just about 20 years experience delivering change across various different sectors, a lot of experience in financial services as well as other areas of the public and private sectors. In my background, I started off as a UAT tester back in the kind of old days where we delivered big giant systems and waterfall projects, as anybody that was here for the previous session will have heard a little bit about. As I said, I'm the head of QAT at 2i Testing, so I've been at 2i for about 8 years. I have a strong focus on delivery and making sure that we are delivering the right outcomes for our clients and that we're helping them achieve their business goals. And challenging the status quo. How can we do things differently? How can we do things better? How can we make sure that we get to those outcomes and everybody gets what they want? And I'm a little bit of a Point Break fan, which might become a little bit clearer as we go through some of this. So in terms of what I'd like you to take away today is how quality engineering can help you and your organisations to get ahead of risk with proactive prevention strategies. Look at how you can detect any of those issues and recover and respond in high-stakes scenarios. And catch those opportunities in the breakers so that we're thinking about things go wrong in production, how do we recover those, how do we anticipate that? How do we keep sharpening the saw, looking at that continuous improvement and making sure that we're doing things better. We're looking for those opportunities and we're driving that forward. And how you navigate success. So how do you get your business objectives? How do you ensure certainty on those deliveries when it is really important that we're working in these high stakes environment? So the stakes have never been higher. I've been working in technology, as I said, for about 20 years and things have changed a lot in that time. There's no getting away from, you need to maintain that competitive edge. You need to be able to deliver fast. You need to be able to meet your users' expectations. Those expectations are continuing to increase and advance. And as the previous speaker was talking about as well, we don't have the same control over our systems anymore. We tend to use as a service as our first go-to. So, you need to be able to accommodate all those changes and respond to that. So we've got a bit of a view of how things have changed over time. We've had, the various ages of the Industrial Revolution into the steam and railways, steel and heavy engineering, and oil and mass production. And for quite some time now, we've been in the age of software and digital. And Jez Humble talks about, in one of his books, the transition from kind of installation, the start of that kind of age, into a more deployment phase. And we're kind of starting to tip that balance now. We're starting to get to the point that the next thing's going to come over the horizon and we've kind of got over that peak. But that's why things are so important now that we deliver change really responsively, we can adapt, we can pivot, we can change where we need to. A couple of examples of organisations who perhaps haven't mastered that will be familiar to people. So Kodak, we all used to have our cameras, now we have our smartphones. That business model didn't evolve quickly enough to keep pace with that demand. Blockbuster, a similar kind of story. The advance of streaming services, they managed to keep up with the switch to DVDs, but then as the likes of Netflix and others came along, they couldn't keep pace with that business model. They became less relevant. They lost their market share. And Nokia, I don't know about anybody else, but when I first got a mobile phone, it was a Nokia. Everybody I knew had a Nokia. And then the advent of smartphones, nobody has a Nokia anymore. So they're all very familiar business stories. They're not necessarily purely technology, but just examples of how things have moved on, things have changed, and we need to keep pace with that. A really good example is, feedback. Feedback's really important. I've got 3 kids, by the way, and the middle daughter's a mad Taylor Swift fan. Feedback, whether you like it or not, with the advent of social media, you're going to get it. So Ticketmaster's a really great example. This is a kind of common thread that we see on Ticketmaster. So I've just pulled some tweets from what was Twitter is now X. So they announce that they're going to have, tickets for Taylor. Everybody knows it's going to be a massive. And then when those tickets go live, Why is it not working? 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 And my personal favourite, bit of SpongeBob in there as well. You know, it's not just the resilience and responsiveness, scalability of the system for Ticketmaster. They also have lots of feedback on some of the features. So verified fans, everybody hates it. Why are they still doing it? There's lots of examples out there. It's a really good one because it's just quite relevant. We're all aware of it. So again, it's about being able to meet those expectations, knowing what your user actually want, knowing what's important to your customer, making sure your business goals are aligned to that you're doing things that are going to drive your business forward, but also give you the outcomes, you responded to market, you're capitalising on your competitive advantage. Now, when I started testing, this was it. You shall not pass. Testing are the gatekeepers. You're not getting into production. We're there to stop you. That's not how things are anymore. That's not actually the value. Don't get me wrong, when I first started testing, it was great fun going and finding what was wrong with a system and saying, I found a bug. And then the developer would crawl in a hole and probably curse me. But actually the value is in quality engineering. How do we make better systems? And quality engineering is all about engineering quality. It's not about putting it in at the end and coming along and testing something and saying, here's the things that's wrong, what are you going to do about it? It's about thinking from the very start, how do we, as a team, deliver cohesive change that's going to add value? It's about that whole team approach and to get the right quality at the right moment. So it's not about having perfection, it's about what's good enough for your business, what's good enough to get that business value, and how do you know when you've got there? How can you capitalise on that so you can deliver that change as quickly as possible? Testing now in quality engineering is all about containing risk, being able to make informed decisions, delivering on your business outcomes. And containing risk is about getting in there as early as possible. We've all probably heard about shift left. And lots of people think about shift left as being just doing testing earlier. But it's actually more about what are the other things that we can do? What are the other quality measures that we can put in place that actually mean that we can understand what our risks are and that we can investigate those as early as possible, and we can think about how that'll work in practice. So I can give you an example of a client that I worked with recently. It was a challenger bank going for the banking license, highly regulated environment, got to make sure that they're passing all those audit requirements and they're doing all the right things for the regulators. But equally, challenger banks are, light on cash a lot of time. They need to get things done really quickly. They need to do it as smoothly as possible with a high level of confidence, but very low resources. So the first conversation there is about, okay, so what's important for your business? What does success look like? How do I understand your business goals? Where are your risks? How are you delivering that change? And we worked with them to design a quality engineering strategy that was focused on their business goals. We didn't say, we'll come in and do system tests and we'll do UAT and we'll do performance tests. We said, how do we deliver your business? And that's where the value's in that conversation, having those early conversations. Okay, so if you did this thing, that would make it much easier. Or have you thought about what if a user does this? Users will never do the things that you expect them to do in production. The best users I have ever worked with are the ones that can find the bugs that I can't. Because they just, it's easier if I do it this way, and I've always done it that way, but actually this thing happens over here. So if you can understand a lot of that and you can draw out those conversations and apply that critical thinking really early on, you've got a much greater chance of containing that risk and being able to deliver higher quality change, but doing it fast. Informed decisions is really important because understanding where your risks are and being able to then see how that would impact your business and what that means for the value that they're trying to deliver is really important. Metrics are a really important way to drive that, having the information at your disposal, understanding what that looks like, and then you can make those informed decisions. So if you're doing a lot of that earlier and you're not just waiting until you get to the point of testing at the end and saying, well, I've got 50 Sev2 defects, what do I do now? Do we push the go live date? Do we just put it in anyway? If you're having those conversations and you understand what that looks like from the start and then you're providing that information, then you've got a much better way of making an informed decision and you can bring in the lifeboats or the ambulances and the firefighters and everybody else when you hit production, so that you can accommodate some of those changes, but you do it consciously. And it's, again, all comes back to business outcomes, making sure you get what you set out to deliver. If you're doing all of that, prevention's much better than cure. So we all, this is a very familiar thing that we'll all have heard before. And if you think about the National Health Service, a lot of funding actually goes into preventing diseases. So I'm diabetic. If you think about diabetes, it's not about fixing it once it's there. It's about working with patients before that to understand how you spot where they're likely to develop a condition. So for me, I had gestational diabetes with my first 2 pregnancies. That's a really good indicator that you're going to develop diabetes. So then I was working with the consultants already. I knew I was going to get it at some point. It's one of those things that's an indicator. But you can stave it off for longer. So you're working on that prevention. You're thinking about how you actually stop something happening rather than dealing with it once it's already occurred. And that's where testing is now in quality engineering. And I use those two terms interchangeably, but they mean the same thing for me because that's how I do it. For lots of people, testing is just about, a cost centre at the end. It's about engineering that quality and making sure that we're doing everything right from the beginning. So this is a simple deployment pipeline that many people have seen before. You go through requirements, then you chuck it into design, then you build something, then you test it, and then you put it into production and operate it. But actually what we're doing with this sequence, having a separate testing stage, is actually introducing a fixing stage. Because all you're doing at that point, and this is a model from Jerry Weinberg, is identifying what's already went wrong and deciding if you're going to fix it or not, and essentially having to be reactive rather than proactive. If you take that away, then you've got a much simpler pipeline. You don't have so many handoffs, you're reducing some of the silos, but you need to embed it with quality engineering. So you're thinking about testability from the outset. How can I do things that will help me deliver a high quality product, the right quality for my organisation? What does it look like once it hits production? What are the things what's the telemetry I want to measure when it goes into production so I understand how my systems perform? I'm getting that feedback so that these systems that we're going to continue to develop and enhance over a lifetime, we know how users are using them in production. We take that back into what we're doing from a development and a quality engineering point of view to understand how that impacts. And we're thinking about what things happen. So stuff happens in production, failures will occur. How do I learn from that? Rather than it being who pressed the wrong button and, maybe Facebook's down for 3 days. Or it's more about, okay, so how do we avoid that button getting pressed? How do we make sure that somebody can't do that? How do we put in the things that make it easy for people to do the right things? And it's all about risk. It's all about having those conversations right from the start. Another way to look at it, and this doesn't matter whether you're doing waterfall or agile or DevOps or any mix of anything like that, you can apply the same principles in any context. We'll all probably have seen the DevOps loop. We'll understand kind of what those stages look like. And it's about understanding on that right-hand side, it's right for me anyway, once you get to production and you're deploying and operating software, how do you make sure it's scalable? How do you make sure it's reliable? How do you build in resilience? How do you make sure you've got secure systems and secure data? And if you're doing that only once you hit production, you're always reacting. You want to bring that into your thinking as early as possible. So it's not just what a product does, it's how it does it. How will your users interact? What's important? And thinking about how you can do a lot of that earlier as well. Think about from the first point that you're discussing requirements. Okay, so we need a username, we need a password. Okay, so people are going to do that wrong. What are we going to show them in an error message? Well, we'll tell them we got the username wrong. Right, well then I know something. So now I've identified the vulnerability. What if we made the user message, actually you've got one of your credentials wrong, but don't tell them what it is? You've addressed that vulnerability. So it's really simple steps, but it's about having the conversation and ejecting the thinking. So obviously I work for 2i, and one of the, we are a software testing consultancy. That's what we do. We're really good at it. And we've got a model which is, this is a bit of my baby. It is called the QAT practice. And this is a model that we deliver for a number of our clients, including the Scottish Government, alongside a delivery capability. And it's also the operating model that we have within our organisation as well. So this picture doesn't really look like it, but we call this a pizza model. because one of the previous diagrams looked like slices of pizza. So these are 8 functions, essentially, that enable you to deliver consistent, predictable outcomes. And this, the way we structure it in the Scottish Government, we have our delivery team who are out doing, the quality assurance and the testing across a very large-scale programme. And they're getting stuff through the pipe. They're getting things to production. But alongside that, we have the QAT practice that's enabling teams, particularly if you're working in a distributed context where you maybe have a number of agile teams and they'll all have autonomous ways of working, but this gives them guide rails. So if we're thinking about what's the best way to approach testing, well, here's how you do risk-based testing. This is what it looks like for this organisation. Here's some guide rails to work within. Again, Scottish Government's a great example for that. So we refreshed the quality policy and strategy as we took on a new contract in 2021 with them. And we've been working with them for 5 years-ish now. And part of that was looking at how do we enable everybody else. So it's not just about doing it at testing, it's about enabling everybody in the delivery pipeline to get involved, getting that real shared ownership of quality. And one of the things that we did was think about, okay, so what's that risk-based approach look like? Okay, so we could do like a traditional kind of risk assessment. Oh, but these teams are all working in Agile. So they do planning poker. Okay, so let's do risk poker. It's a really transferable technique because it's like planning poker, except instead of saying, I've got an 8 or a 13 in story pointing, you're thinking about what your risk is. And everybody then is having the conversation right at the outset. It becomes embedded in their practice. But it's not just testing. We're not just coming in at the end and saying, but have you done this? It's about getting everybody to think about it. And then as you're building systems, you're building them with that in mind. So we have implemented 90-day continuous improvement cycles in our engagements so that we're looking at how we can sharpen the saw. How can we make things better all the time? And a really good example of that is, it's all about delivering time, cost, quality benefits. What are the things that are going to be important? How do we make it cheaper? How do we make it faster? How do we make it better? And an example of that is for test data generation. So the programme that we're working on in the Scottish Government is to deliver the Scottish Social Security benefits. And a big part of that is obviously migrating a lot of stuff from DWP because they have the existing benefits. So there's lots of integrations there. Lots of dependencies on data migrating across. Really important, it's vulnerable citizens that we're dealing with. It has to be right. We can't not have an application going through. We can't have payments not going through. Has to be good. Has to be right. And test data is a really big challenge in that. DWP have got their own priorities, so providing data for us for our testing isn't necessarily the top of their list. And we had to overcome that and think about how we could do that. So we put in a test data generator. It could take us between 20 to 60 days of effort to set up test data manually. It wasn't adding value. It was delaying feedback. It was making things take longer. Implementing our test data management strategy and our test data generator meant that we could generate live-like data, have it available at the point of need, and it being reusable across releases. And that delivered a benefit and outcome for the government of a 50 to 80% manual effort remove. It's a big saving, made our teams move faster, meant they could do higher value activities. But that wasn't the only step. So okay, that gets us to a point in time, that's really good. But actually, see when we come to delivering a release, it still takes us 5 days to generate some of the data that we need. Okay, so how do we do that faster? So we've worked on that again and sharpened the saw and iterated and continuously improved on it and taken that 5 days now down to minutes, 2 or 3 minutes to generate 5 days worth of data. And decoupled the dependency because we had a reliance on a certain team within the test team to generate that data for us. But now we've actually given that to everybody. So anybody who needs data has it at the point of need and they have it in seconds. And if you're doing a large volume of applications, you maybe wait a couple of minutes. So again, it's about that continuous improvement. How do we do it better? It's all about engineering quality and making sure that we're doing all the right things to deliver the outcomes. So I hope you'll take away that by implementing quality engineering practices, you can anticipate the future, you can ride the surge, you can catch those opportunities, and you can navigate success, and you'll deliver your business outcomes. So thank you. for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks. How do you define your metrics? I guess it's different for each project, but can you give examples of the key metrics that you use to ensure that you deliver the business outcomes, please?
Yep, so that's a really good question. So I'll summarise it just for the recording. So how do we identify the right metrics to deliver, so we make sure we're delivering those business outcomes? It's different for every client. It depends on where they are in their journey as well. You know, we have traditional metrics like, you know, how many test cases we run, where do the defects look like, what's the defect density, so we understand where there's pockets of the application that have maybe got a bit more work or a bit more investigation. What we want to move towards and what we're doing with clients who are maybe more digital first and haven't got that legacy is looking at the DORA metrics. So how do we make sure we're delivering flow? How do we understand what that business value is? We define objectives at the start. We use quite often we'll use OKRs. So OKRs are objectives and key results. And my colleagues who are in the room will probably see me getting on my soapbox because it's one of my pet things. But it's understanding what it is we want to achieve, why we want to do that, working with our clients so we've got that. And then those key results are, what does success look like? They're measurable, they're specific, they are time bound so that we understand, you know, well, we want to get a 20% increase in our customer base. It's a measurable thing we can go and do. So having those complementary metrics that allow us to measure progress through delivery and then reflect on it once it gets to production as well gives us a really good balance. But it's metrics that tell a story. You know, if we ran 200 test cases. Okay, were they the important ones? Having that story that goes around it that helps say, well, these are the business value, this is the thing that we want to deliver, these are the important features, then allows us to tell a story of, well, we've covered the important things, we've uncovered a lot of risk, we've got information and can make decisions, and we're getting to the stuff that's maybe lower down the priority list. So it's really crafting it for each client.
So no metrics lined up at all. So do you modify your metrics en route at all, or did you?
Yes.
What give you examples where you modify the metric?
So we need to look at the maturity of usefulness of metrics as well. So for some organisations, you know, maybe we're looking at not just delivering the business outcome might be transforming their test function, for example. So we'll maybe start with some raw data around how much testing's costing them, get that cost of testing. But over time, we'll refine that and work with them, and they'll get a better understanding of actually, well, it's not just testers that are doing testing. We've got stuff happening in development. We've got business analysts that are doing preventative test measures as well. And we start to kind of build that story and then get to a cost of quality. So you start to evolve and refine your metrics with a client as their journey evolves as well. Okay, thanks.
Hi.
Hiya.
If I'm understanding correctly, and you're using artificial data for the test data, do you have a plan in place, or how regularly will you be checking that data to ensure that it's still accurate and the data hasn't separated from the real life data?
It's a really good question, how we keep the data in sync with what's actually happening. So we regularly look back at, you know, what's happening in production. GDPR and everything, and having sensitive data, we don't necessarily want to take that directly in, but we'll look at what those data combinations look like and make sure that that's still kind of keeping pace. One of the next enhancements probably for our test data generator is to use AI probably to look and listen at what's happening in production, tell us what's actually happening in there, and then we can synthesize data using, you know, artificial technology to really make that keep sync with production. We do also use that, so it's a way for us to test early. We do still test with migrated data, but we've got a greater level of confidence when we get to that point that actually we're covering our bases. So it's more a confidence check rather than where we're going to throw out a big issue first time. No worries. I'm conscious I'm standing between you guys and lunch. I'm happy to take any more questions if there are any, but equally happy to let you go for lunch. Thank you so much.